Good morning. We're going to get started. Hi, I'm Tom Wolf. I'm a member of the Science, Medicine, and Technology Committee. And I want to welcome you to the presentation this morning on how to live to be 100 and not regret it. And that reminds me of my late mother, who, when she was about 88, we went to her physician, and the physician said to her, you might live to be 100. And she said, I don't want to live to be 100. And she got her wish. She died a couple of years after that. But Phil's going to try to talk to you today about how to live to be 100 and not regret it. I'm going to introduce Phil and then turn it over to him. I call him Phil because he's a personal friend of mine. Dr. Van Reken earned his BS from Calvin College, his MD from Rush Medical School in Chicago, and he did his residency at Blodgett Hospital and St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Rapids. Dr. Van Reken is a board-certified internist who practiced general internal medicine in the West Chicago suburbs for 39 years until his retirement 1 year ago this month. Dr. Van Reken has given more than 500 medical talks to physicians during his career on many subjects, including cholesterol, hypertension, smoking cessation, osteoporosis, and prostate disease. Dr. Van Reken will discuss the steps people should take to maximize their life expectancy. He will also present data on various diseases and how to prevent and treat them. He also will review recommended medical exams and the steps to take to prevent diseases and to detect and treat such diseases in their early stages. We'd ask that you would hold your questions till Dr. Van Renken's presentation is over. And I just want to say a couple of things because I know Phil personally. He uses a fair amount of his retirement time to play tennis. We're in a little tennis group in South Haven. And he also likes to fix cuckoo clocks, as he calls them. So if I'm sure he'd be happy to entertain questions about that after the whole thing is over. So Phil, welcome. And we really appreciate your taking the time to come here today.
Does that work? Good. All right. I do cuckoo clocks, but more recently I'm into wooden boats. I have 6 of them, and my wife wants me to not get any more. Once you fix them, though, they're so beautiful. It's like your children. You can't get rid of them. So that's the hard part. And being from Holland, you probably know a lot about wooden boats. So I have given a lot of lectures around the country during my career. I had some interesting stories. I gave a talk in Minot, North Dakota. It's called M-I-N-O-T. Well, it should be pronounced Minot, right? M-I-N-O-T. Anyway, so I called it Minot during the lecture, and I was kind of embarrassed. And then I gave a talk in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is like Reading Railroad, you know, on Monopoly. It's pronounced Reading. So I had to give a talk in Kissimmee, Florida, and I wasn't sure if it was Kissimmee or Kissimmee. So on the way from the airport, I got a rental car. I stopped at a fast food place, and I got a Coke to wet my whistle. Young man behind the counter, I said, you know, I'm from out of state and I have to give a talk here. Could you slowly say the name of this place so that I can pronounce it correctly? And he went, Burger King. So I realized quickly why he worked there. Now, we all are here to talk about living to 100 and not regretting it, okay? Personally, I want to die the way my grandpa did, all right? Shut your eyes and slowly just drift off and not screaming and yelling like everyone in his car. July 12th. So This is the topic. The young lady becomes the middle-aged lady, becomes the older lady. And how do you make that transition? Okay. What are the odds of how you're going to die? People get this confused all the time. Shark attack, fireworks, airplane accident, killed by an intimate partner, motor vehicle accident, diabetes, cancer, or heart disease. What are the chances? 1 in 3.7 million you will die from a shark attack, okay? Fireworks, 230,000. Airplanes, still very safe, 1 in 40,000. Intimate partner, 20 times more common than an airplane. So motor vehicle accidents, you got to be careful with those, but that's 1 in 88. Diabetes, 1 in 53, cancer, 1 in 7, heart disease, 1 in 4. So when you're trying to prevent something, you have to, like when the guy they asked him why he robbed banks, he said, well, that's where the money is. Okay, so when you're preventing death, you want to prevent the things that are actually going to kill you. Cardiovascular disease, we're going to spend a little bit of time with this because it's quite important. Hypertension, we're going to talk quite a bit about. Diabetes is epidemic in our country. It's unbelievable, the increase in diabetes that's going on. It's related to weight, and we're going to talk about that. Smoking, we're going to hit on cholesterol. We're going to talk a little bit about prevention of cancers, a couple miscellaneous things, vaccines, not to get political, but we're going to talk a little about that. And then some common medical misbeliefs we're going to talk about. So preventable deaths in our country, if you would treat every condition appropriately, high blood pressure is the most important thing that we would treat aggressively. All right. We're going to talk about that. Smoking, breast cancer screening, cervical cancer. We know about the guidelines for this. When you look at what actually takes people, cancer, stroke, smoking are all there. COPD is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. But again, heart disease trumps all of them. So if we had 2 hearts and 1 kidney, we'd live to be 110. All right. But the good Lord gave us 1 heart and 2 kidneys. When you look at the causes of death in the US, this just goes through a list of the various things that we're talking about. And the reason I put this in is because what we're going to see is this is a lot different than what it used to be. All right. Here's Nuremberg, Germany in 1900. Look what people died of: tuberculosis, consumption, they called it, typhoid fever, diphtheria, pertussis, which is whooping cough, scarlet fever, bronchitis, pneumonia. What do those all have in common? They're infections. All right. People lived, they were lucky to live to 50. Heart disease wasn't very common. In fact, in the late 1800s, people would have heart attacks. They'd run in the bathroom because you get nauseated when your heart doesn't have enough blood. The underside is right on the stomach. You often feel sweaty. You get nauseated. You don't feel, they run in the bathroom and they died. And they used to think that was a stomach issue that killed people. They didn't even realize it was the heart that did it. Okay. The annual toll, acute myocardial infarction, the first one, 1 million, often recurrent ones. Half the people who have a heart attack are dead within 24 hours. All right. So it's important to know 1 in 4, your first symptom of heart disease is you die. All right. Your heart doesn't get enough blood. You don't pump blood. It goes into ventricular arrhythmia and it's over. Your blood pressure falls, you're dead. The other quarter get symptoms, go to the hospital, but they've had damage done. They can't be stented or bypassed quick enough, and they expire as well. All right. So if you have someone who had a heart attack and they're alive, they're the lucky half. because the other half had no warning at all. All right. Stroke, 500,000 first strokes, 100,000 recurrent, caused a lot of deaths. You know, there's only one thing worse than dying, and that's being disabled. So if you have a stroke and you're in a nursing home and you can't eat or walk or talk, that's almost worse than just dropping dead, because oftentimes there is recovery. Obviously, within 24 or 48 hours, you get function back, but strokes are devastating. Okay. Every 33 seconds, someone dies of cardiovascular disease. We're going to talk about modifiable risk factors: smoking, diabetes, lipid, cholesterol. 95% of people who have a fatal coronary heart disease event have a major risk factor. Okay. Let's talk about hypertension. It's a stealth killer. What does stealth mean? It's silent. You can have high blood pressure. You feel wonderful. It doesn't give you, initially you might get headaches, but your body accommodates to that. Just like going from whole milk to 2%. Remember the first time you took 2%? It tasted terrible, right? Now you drink whole milk, it tastes like cream. So your body accommodates to blood pressure and you don't get symptoms anymore. And one of the medical fallacies is, if you feel good, I must be healthy. That's not true. All right. So you can have a terrible condition and feel quite well. Now, hypertension is a poorly named disease. It has nothing to do with being hyper or being tense. All right. None of that. All right. So that's what it's called, hypertension. Hypertension is a state where the pressure exerted on the walls of the arteries is too great and causes damage to the heart, the arteries, and other organs. What you have to think about is every time your heart beats, your arteries are rubber. Think of them as elastic, they're rubber. So they bounce out and they go back, systole, diastole, pumping, relaxing. So if you saw an x-ray of your body right now, your whole body is having these pumping actions. Well, if you have too much pressure, when the heart beats, it stretches the rubber too far. And rubber, as you'll notice, if you ever have an antique car or whatever, and you look at the windows and you push on the rubber that keeps the water from coming in, it cracks. It loses elasticity. It loses its ability to move. So it becomes stiff. When it becomes stiff, the pressure in the pipe goes up because the artery no longer enlarges the way it's supposed to. So that's how you think about hypertension. It's a vice on the heart, squeezing it. No symptoms. US population, about half the population doesn't have it, but a good portion of people do have hypertension. And the funny thing is they keep lowering what's normal. 65 million Americans, 1 in 3. This is a little bit dated, 2004. It's probably even higher now. It's a big problem in here. And you always have to look at the signs. I take pictures of signs that make no sense. If it's drive-through service, why are you parking? All right. Patients with hypertension are going to grow in the United States, partly because people are getting older. The older you get, the stiffer your arteries get, the stiffer they get, the higher the pressure in the arteries. I'm going to show a slide soon, but if you don't have hypertension at age 50, you will have a 90% chance still of getting it, all right, in your life, if you live. 1.4 billion people in the world, 14% are adequately controlled. We're going to talk a little bit about getting a cuff, ordering it on Amazon, bringing it home, and checking your pressure. That's one number that's going to tell you very quickly how your vascular system is doing. As you get older, you see from the slide, years of follow-up in people 50 to 65. Men, of course, get more hypertension than women. Men live less, women live longer than men. So hypertension, eventually it catches up. Mortality from cardiovascular equal in men and women, but the women get it 10 to 15 years later. All right, so they get the same disease. I sometimes say when a woman goes through menopause, they slowly become men, and they start getting all the diseases. Women never get gout before menopause. After menopause, they get gout, facial hair, all the other fun that goes up with getting older. So women start to develop men's illnesses. 22% of people die from cancer, 47% die from heart disease. 1 in 4 heart deaths. When you ask a woman about breast cancer or heart disease, 1 out of every 29 women die from breast cancer, 1 in 2.5 die from cardiovascular. So we're getting even better at decreasing the breast cancer risk. Part of the problem with heart disease in women is we often assume they don't have it. Estrogen is a great protector. All right. Women before the age of 50 don't have heart attacks unless they smoke, take drugs, cocaine, snort, whatever people do nowadays. But in general, women are much more protected from this than men are. Women in heart disease, and as doctors, you don't think of it. A woman comes in with upper abdominal pain, you think gallbladder, you think nerves, you think depression, but you don't think heart right away. And your doctor needs to pay more attention that women do get heart disease as well. Hypertension. In the Framingham study, Framingham, Massachusetts is a town where people never move. They stay there forever. All right. So they do longitudinal studies on these people over time. And maybe it's like Holland, Michigan, I'm not sure, but people stay there 40, 50, 60 years. And when they study the men and women, the normotensive in the white and the hypertensive in the red, the CHD, coronary heart disease incidence, goes way up in that group. All right. And we also know that if you treat people with placebo or active treatment, there's a big difference in how well people do. I have a funny story about placebo. I took over my dad's practice in Oak Park, Illinois, and he was a family practitioner. He worked for 35, 40 years. I joined him in practice. He lasted 3 days and he quit. And this is a funny about humans. I sat in the office, this young, doctor, and my dad was there. And every patient who walked in, we said to him, "Do you want to see the old Dr. Van Reken or the young one?" They all said the old one. I mean, I've been seeing him 30 years. Who wants to see this? So I sat in the office reading magazines, while my dad did all the work. And the deal was I got all the money, but I paid all the bills. Well, I didn't do any work. And this is before COVID, where you didn't get paid for doing nothing. So anyway, it was funny. My dad had a couple patients. He had a big jar of pills that were sugar pills. And he would give these to people for, who they worked well, and he would give them to people with nervous condition. People swore by him. Give me those little white pills. People have just something in there. There's a fact in medicine. If the doctor gave the sample to the patient, it was 3 or 4 times more likely to work than if he just said to the nurse, "Hand him that pill." Something about the doctor giving you the pill. So you got to be careful with placebos, though. How is blood pressure measured? All right. The top number is when the heart squeezes, the systolic, the top number, and the diastolic is when the heart relaxes. So all through your body, these arteries are getting bigger and smaller. And both numbers are important. All right. In the old days, we used to say the top number was 100 plus your age. So if you were 80 years old, your top number could be 180. Well, we think that study was sponsored by undertakers. Because that's not true anymore. You can't have a pressure of 180, all right? So that's the way we look at it. The guidelines are changing. Normal is now less than 120/80, all right? Elevated 120 to 129 on the top, under 80. Hypertension used to be called elevated. Now stage 1 is 130 to 139. And stage 2 is over 140. That used to be stage 1. So we're lowering it because we realize how important getting low pressure in your pipes doesn't damage the pipes. Quick example, I had a building in Chicago and it had a boiler and I couldn't get the water to go to the second floor radiators. You guys are old enough to know how these work. You know, the water wouldn't get to the radiators. So I called a plumber and he went downstairs and there's a valve that you push that reduces the city water pressure down so that it's much lower than what comes out of the faucet. And that's how the water gets to the side. Well, he released that valve and it went to city water. Boy, I went upstairs and the water was pouring out of the radiator and I shut it when it was all full. And I said to him, why don't we just leave that valve open and leave the pressure high so the water, he goes, you can do that. He said, but in 3 years, I'll have to come and change all the pipes in the building. And I'm thinking to myself, that's exactly what hypertension is. When the pressure's high in the pipes, it ruins the pipes. When the pressure's high in the arteries, it ruins the arteries. You want the lowest pressure available. All right, high normal and optimal. Look at the difference, the incidence of cardiovascular disease. You really want to get your pressure down. All right, slow down or die. That's an interesting sign. You know, death is God's way of telling us to slow down for some people, and it works that way. Here's that slide I talked about before. If you're 55 and don't have hypertension, you still have a 91, 93% chance of getting it as you get older. That's why it's called a vital sign. All right? Temperature, pulse, respiration, blood pressure, they're all vital. Pulse is also very important. If your pulse, to think about it, runners, when they come in my office, they have two things. They have flat stomachs and they have slow pulses. All right. Runners have a pulse in the low 60s. Normal people have, or people who don't run are in the 70s or 80s. When you think about it, you know, they asked Neil Armstrong, who landed on the moon, of course, if he ever jogged, he said, I believe every man has so many heartbeats, I'm not wasting any of mine running around a park. But when you think about it, by running around a park and raising your heart rate, it lowers your rate the rest of the day. So maybe we do have so many heartbeats, and the more you run, the lower your rate, the more beats you have because they aren't going as you aren't using them up. All right. So 50% have high blood pressure. Control rates are terrible. Women make up a disproportionate share of the older population. Greater risk of dying from heart failure. Hypertension is a major risk factor for stroke, coronary artery, kidney disease, leading to heart failure. The older population, our little CRC in Chicago, Christian Reformed Church, had 29 widows and 1 widower. That kind of tells you who lasts. But boy, if you can make it to that age, you get to pick any of those ladies. Funny thing is, there are very few women over the age of 70 who are interested in marriage. Again, Does it help when we treat it? I'm going to go through this, but it does if you treat people aggressively, like I mentioned before. You are going to see great effects. They did the HOPE study with ramipril, which is an ACE inhibitor. They designed these trials very carefully to try and tell the difference between the treatment and the non-treatment arms. All right. Remember, statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. So you have to look at the design of a trial and make sure that it makes sense. Because if you set it up wrong, you need to go back to school. I love the guy scratching his head. How did that happen? Risk reduction, when you use an ACE inhibitors, angiotensin enzyme inhibitors, and angiotensin receptor blockers are some of the best drugs for treating hypertension. Low side effects, and they do reduce the risk of things happening. Now, other things for hypertension: lose weight. We're going to hit on weight just a little bit in our country. Some signs aren't very nice. You notice who's riding the bike and who's on the motorized vehicles. Our church once had a Weight Watchers group, and it said in the bulletin, "Enter through the double doors in the back of church." And I thought that wasn't very nice either. Stop smoking. Increase physical activity. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The question is getting in the habit of doing these things. All right. Exercise is important. Reduce sodium. My wife loves snacks. I don't like them as much as she does. Some people, and Pepsi's earnings came out this morning. Oh, and they make all the goodies, all the stuff with snacks, as well as pop, which is unbelievable. Pop itself, 1 can of pop a day, you gain 12 pounds in a year. It's 180 calories. That's 18 minutes on a treadmill. You're going to walk 18 minutes on a treadmill for 1 Coke? And McDonald's gives you the biggest one for the same price. Thank you, McDonald's. All right. Limit alcohol. Here's the bachelor's fridge. You got to be careful. It starts out when they're young. They start looking through the fridge. Next thing you know, they got their friends over and they're all passed out on the floor. Reduce saturated fat and cholesterol. All right. Other strategies: see your physicians, get the digital machine, check it at home. One reading doesn't mean anything. You got to not when we always check it when you're calm and relaxed. How about when you're home screaming at the kids? So you need to find out what the average pressure is during the day. These digital machines talk to you. They're $40. They're very accurate. Your goal is 120/80. Take your pills the same time. Your smartphone has a timer on it. So you can just hit it, and every day at 8 in the morning, you get a beep to take your pills. All right. The most expensive pills you take are the ones you don't take. Right. And a lot of prescriptions go unfilled. You leave the doctor, you feel good, you never get the pills. All right. Avoid salt, junk foods, limit alcohol. The rule on alcohol: 2 drinks a day for a man, 1 for a woman. And a drink is a 12-ounce beer, 6 ounces or 4 ounces of wine, or 2 ounces of alcohol, of rum or gin or whatever you're into. And you can't make up for it all in one day. So you can't have 14 beers on Friday night and say, I had my 2 a day. All right. I mean, we come up with more things. Sleep is important. Let's talk a little bit about stroke. We end up talking about the same thing, because what's the major risk factor for stroke is smoking and hypertension. All right, coronary disease, stroke, all these are in normal blood pressure people. When you have high blood pressure, all of them go up. All right. Again, hypertension is very important. Stroke is going up in our country. All right. The incidence, Black individuals have a much higher incidence. They have more hypertension. All right. And there's various reasons for that. Oh, I like that slide. This is my favorite. Somehow I wouldn't go to that church. And the Church of the Cross. I can think of other ways. All right, heredity and longevity. All right, if your parents and grandparents lived into their 90s, you have a higher likelihood of making it there. You know, so I always, in my office, if your mother lived to 95 and your dad lived to 85, you're at about 90. You double, add them up and divide by 2. You know, it makes some sense. You know, genes are important. Your genes are your parents. Each of you gave you half your genes. So what happens to them is very likely going to happen to you. Okay. And one example I had of genes, I was giving a talk in downtown Chicago, and I got on an elevator in the Chicago Hilton and Towers. There was a middle-aged lady at that time in the elevator, and I went up with her maybe 15 stories. And I didn't say anything. I didn't have a name badge on, anything. And this woman looked at me as I got off the elevator. She said, "Is your father Everett Van Reken?" I said, whatever. I mean, there's 5 million people in Chicago, and you know who my father is from riding in and out. She goes, "When you got in this elevator, the way you stood, the look on your face reminded me of your dad 35 years ago." And his name came to me, and I said, "That is unbelievable. I mean, how does that happen?" But you have to pick your parents carefully. All right. If both your parents die at a young age and they didn't die in a car accident or through some other means, you better be careful. Because if you know, when you hear about some baseball player, they find dead in bed or this, and it's not drug or whatever, I always want to know, how long did his dad live? His dad had a heart attack at 50. His grandpa lived to 40. You know, there's often things like this run in families. So you got to be even more careful. And family history is important. I always took it in the office. You want to know the parents, the siblings, all these things, very important. Stroke risk factors, all right? Age, the older you are, the more likely you are to have a stroke, okay? Gender, race, Black individuals, heredity, if your parents both had strokes, you might. One word on gender, it's non-modifiable, but nowadays it is. It's an older slide, all right? It doesn't help to be a man and become a woman as far as longevity. As a matter of fact, your death rate is twice as high if you have a sex change, all right? And compared to a woman, they call them now cis women. That means you identify with the gender you were at birth. You're a cis man or a cis woman. Compared to them, the death rate is 3 times higher. A woman who was born a woman and stayed a woman compared to a man who became a woman. So you can modify that, but it doesn't help for longevity. Suicide is high in people that have these transgender procedures. HIV was very high. That number is coming down over time. All right, modifiable things, blood pressure, your risk of heart disease. If you have atrial fibrillation, 15 or 20% of people, there's somebody in this room who has atrial fibrillation. There's a lot of people. You got to take anticoagulants. You got to do something with that. When you have your upper chamber is not beating, the blood is in there, it's not moving, it's going to clot. And when it clots, it goes to the ventricle, goes up to your brain, you have a stroke. So we're very good. Now we have all kinds of procedures for that. If you've had a transient ischemic attack, a short-lived stroke, you're more likely to have a significant stroke going forward. Behaviors, cigarette smoking is my pet peeve. My pet peeve. In medicine, all you have to do is tell a patient one time to stop smoking. That's my obligation. I told them every visit. They walk in, you can smell a smoker a block away, for heaven's sakes. In high school, I used to catch people smoking. I went in the bathroom and there was smoke in there. Yeah, right. So every time I tell them, are you still smoking? Smoking is a killer and it's expensive, $10 a pack. You smoke a pack a day, it costs you $300,000 of your retirement. You ever think of that? Of course, a latte at Starbucks costs you $150,000. But I got to have one every day. Wait till you're 80 and you're looking for that money. Smoke, because no one should infringe on your right to cough up black phlegm. You've got a right to do that. All right. Heavy alcohol use. I said you could have 2 drinks a day. You got to take it the right way. Okay. That is more than a 12-ounce beer. The guy's sweating already. All right. And physical inactivity. All right. We are a sedentary society. We need 3 times a week to get out and do something. All right. Ride a bike, do whatever. When I took this picture, it reminded me, I met a guy at a party, a neighbor of ours had a birthday party and his brother came, had a beard like this, and looked sort of like this. And just for fun, I said, what kind of Harley do you have? He says, I have a 2006. I mean, Harley people look like this. So I'm just going to say a few things about motorcycles if you want to live to 100. All right. 3% of all registered vehicles, but 14% of all deaths. All right. I had patients in Chicago that needed transplants, kidney, liver, all these transplants. Illinois had a long waiting list. But if you go to Wisconsin, the list is much shorter. You get your now, why is that? Harley. People drive Harleys. They have an accident, they're brain dead, they're on a machine, and you can get organs. All right. So it's not just that. It may be the way they collect organs and have things, but you could get one. And Michigan's not exactly perfect when it comes. And to ride a motorcycle without a helmet is really, you can't see more. You have signs everywhere, look twice, all this, but they're hard to see. We had a sign in the ER, buy your son a motorcycle for his last birthday. Prevention of stroke. All right. Just a quick one. 60 to 80-year-old patients, average blood pressures, 170 over 77. They treated them aggressively. Elderly people, 60 to 80 plus. Look at the reductions in the events that occur. So treatment of hypertension reduces strokes as well. And this is the reduction in stroke in this study. Significant 36% reduction in stroke. So, you got to read the signs. All right. Don't get off. 95% of people have a major risk factor. I'm going to just hit smoking, 157 billion. When you stand in 7-Eleven or a gas station and somebody comes in and orders 2 packs and it's 17, 18, I just cringe. I can't believe they would do that. $3,400, $7 a pack, shortens your lifespan, a male 13 years. Give me something that's going to shorten my lifespan. Women, you don't think about this often. Women are smaller, at least usually, than men. Their lungs are smaller. So when they smoke a pack, it's like a man smoking a pack and a half. We don't often talk about that, but there's consequences. Life insurers, what do they ask you when you get life insurance? My daughter just signed up for health insurance. If you smoke or they pick up cotinine in your urine, which means you've smoked, your insurance costs are much higher. All right. She has to pay an extra so much. And, as an aside, we often, when you drive and you get 5 speeding tickets, what happens to your insurance? It goes up. When you live and you're 50 pounds overweight, you never exercise, you smoke, what happens to your health insurance? In the old days, nothing. So you're much more likely to need knee replacement, hip replacement, all these things your insurance has to pay for, but you don't have any higher premium because, we don't equate healthy behavior. Now companies are getting smart. If you do all the things you're supposed to do, they lower your healthcare costs. And that's the way it should be. If you're doing unhealthy things, you should pay more. I've had patients say, I can quit anytime I want. I've quit 20 times. It really should be a 5th vital sign because it's that important. Do you smoke? And it doesn't just affect strokes, heart attacks, cancer. Every cancer goes up with smoking. Skin, breast, brain, pancreas, lung, bladder. I'm telling you, I pick up bladder cancers in women and men. They almost always smoke to get something in cigarettes goes through the urine and affects the bladder wall and gives you a cancer in the bladder. All right. And your teeth. Oh, my goodness. Teeth are very important. One of the reasons we live longer than people in the Caribbean or poorer countries or sub-Saharan Africa is teeth. Your teeth, it's better to have no teeth than to have rotten teeth. All right? Because rotten teeth, that you get infections in the mouth, it goes down and you end up with heart disease and lung issue and all kinds of things. So take care of your teeth. Spouses have to sink or swim together. If a husband comes in smoking and the wife smokes and he wants to quit and she doesn't, it's probably not going to happen. So you got to come together and say, we're going to stop this. With the money we're saved, we're going to Hawaii for a week next fall. All right. Some men I could never get to stop smoking until I showed them this. You don't realize it. The artery going to certain organs in your body is very small. And if you get a clot or atherosclerosis in that artery, things don't happen. So I try every means possible to get them to stop. But when you mention this to men, they perk up a little. And they realize that's something that's important. At least it's important to them. Age at quitting, 60 years of age, you still save 3 years on your life. If you quit at 50, you save 6 years. You quit at 40, you save 9 years. 30 years of age, you quit, you save 10 years. So I tell people the important thing is stopping. Well, I've been smoking my whole life. You're still one thing, another side, one organ in your body that goes bad no matter what you do are your lungs. All right, lungs, when you're 20, you have a certain lung output. When you're 90, you've lost half of your lung function, whether you smoke or not. You get short of breath. Pollution, the environment, the aging process. So you really want to try and preserve your lungs. When you use a blower at home in a shed, you put a mask on. When you're in a contained area, you want all that particular matter not to get inside these lungs, okay? So, and then to smoke is just to add insult to injury. And as I mentioned, every cancer, skin cancer, higher in smokers. What you have to remember, nicotine is an irritant. It's a stimulator of cells, all right? And when you inhale that, all the cells in your body become stimulated. Well, you don't want stimulated cells because they divide abnormally, all right? Either too fast or whatever. And if they start dividing without control, it's cancer, all right? So just remember how bad that is. Let's talk a little about diabetes. The prevalence of diabetes, 91. The black states are people with high incidence of obesity, 94. Look at 98. The numbers are even higher now, okay? Definition of obesity, adult men and women, a BMI, a body mass index of 18.5 to 24.9 is healthy. 25 to 29.9 is overweight, and above 30 is obesity. Now, it takes into account your height and your weight, okay? Most of us aren't too fat, we're too short. If you were 6'11", you'd be normal. The problem is you got a 6'11" into a 5'6" body, all right? The prevalence in US, 41.9% of adults in 2000 are obese. That's almost half the people in the country, and that's up from 30% in 2000. So this is something we need to pay attention. Family history, if you have a diabetic parent, all right, type 2, got it as an adult, it's much more inheritable than type 1. Insulin requiring young people get it. So if one parent is diabetic, your risk of getting it just doubled. And if both parents have it, you better watch out. But if you keep your weight under control, you're going to put that off as long as possible. We screen people for it. Certain population, Hispanic population, is the highest in the nation. All right, you have to screen people. If you have a baby and become a diabetic during pregnancy, your risk of getting it later go up as well. The metabolic syndrome, we call it that when you carry most of your weight in the middle. All right, you have skinny legs and skinny arms, but your weight is in the middle, and then you have other things that go along with it, then you're more likely to develop diabetes. The nurses, this is always something I get a kick out of, but waist, your waist circumference is something they wanted us to measure in the office. Now, you know, I was a doctor 39 years, you know, it's such a difference between men and women. Men, they come in, you know, yeah, you know, let her spin, you know, they don't care if they have a weight issue. They, you know, women, I'm telling you, they fib, they lie, they won't get on the scale. Had one lady take her fake breast out, you know, to weigh, and, you know, I'm like, at some point, I never had a man refuse to be weighed, and women every week would not be weighed. And, you know, there's dangers. This is a comforting fact. Mildly overweight adults who were never obese tend to live a little longer than adults who have been normal or underweight their whole lives. So that makes me feel a little better. You know, so if you're a little overweight, and part of that is you have reserves. In other words, if you have an accident or this or that, and you go in the hospital and you're skinny mini, you need nutrition pretty quickly. Whereas if you got a little extra baggage, you can fight it off a little bit longer. All right. Since we're talking about longevity, I want to note that wives who are overweight tend to live longer than their husbands that mention it. That's a short conversation. Americans have an aversion to exercise. How can you have an escalator going into 24-hour fitness? You know, nobody on the stairs, you know. New Year's resolutions I can stick with: overeat, exercise never, smoke daily, drink often. The wife doesn't look happy. There's a difference in signs in the US and Europe. Here's the US, here's Europe. Isn't it interesting? The kids are running on the Europe sign. In America, they're walking. So I think they're more active, but they smoke in Europe. You know, they smoke, and that takes pretty much a lot of the benefits away. Regular exercise controls weight, reduces risk of diabetes, of heart disease, cancer risks. This is something we don't mention. I don't know, it's a taboo subject. When you gain weight, your risk of cancer goes up. All right? Women who are overweight get more breast cancer. And if you think of it medically, fat tissue holds estrogen. There are stores of hormones, and when you have more estrogen, it's a fuel for breasts. And so when you gain weight, you start to develop these kind of hormone responsive cancers because you have too much of the hormone lingering around. But yeah, have you ever heard that? Heavy women get breast cancer more? It's something about weight and women is taboo in our country. We can't talk about it. Reduces stress, exercise, osteoporosis. All right. You want, you know, heavy women and men get osteoarthritis in their joints, and thin women get osteoporosis. All right. So if you're thin, you don't put enough stress on your bones to make them stay strong. If you're 40 pounds overweight, every step you take is strengthening your bones because you're lifting weights, but your joints wear out. All right. So so you want to be thin, but active. Tennis, we play with Tom. Keep active, keep moving, helps the joints, keeps you thin, and helps the bones stay strong. Swimming and other things. Flight for life, landing area, dead end. Diabetes is going up, and it's much higher than this. It's epidemic, all right? And, 9%, 1 kilogram weight gain, which is 2.2 pounds, 9% increase in risk of developing. If you can keep your weight down, you will keep your risk of diabetes low. Here's a quote I have: the more often you go through the golden arches, the quicker you'll be at the pearly gates. Now they're recording this. I'll probably get in trouble, but this I saw was an interesting. But we do. We eat poorly. We don't plan our meals. We stop at McDonald's. We order things that, if you look at the calorie chart, always remember every 10 calories is a minute on the treadmill, and a Big Mac is like 500. That's 50 minutes. One of the benefits of going on a treadmill is you do it for 45 minutes, and then you think, I am not going to have a large order of fries, and just wipe out what I just did by doing that 45-minute workout. All right. Diabetes is cardiovascular disease by definition. The minute you become a diabetic, you have heart disease by definition. All right. And there's all kinds of medicines that we give you to treat that. So it's very, very important. Doubled in men 3 to 4 times. Cause of death: people with diabetes die from heart attacks and strokes much more than people who are not diabetic. Diabetes to linked various cancers, pancreas and colon. All right. That was a very important sign that you need to follow. A word to the wise. One of the men here is going to see the doctor. Bring your list of pills to the doctor. So many mistakes could be avoided. You know, we have computers, we have handwritten your pill, your dose, and how you take it. Bring that simple list so that his list and your list are the same. People bring me all kinds of things in the office, but this is something I really need to see, because side effects, other problems with pills are something that are easily avoided if you just don't bring a shoe bag with all your pills in and have to go through each one. Here's my vitamin for my eyes. And, you know, anyway, just make a list. And aside to that too, I don't take any vitamins, you know. You eat a balanced diet. If you want to take a multivitamin, okay, but these stores that sell this stuff, there is no evidence. If there was, they would be FDA regulated. So all these things you're taking for memory, what's it called? Prevagen, it's garbage. But the power of suggestion, and if you pay enough for it, I'll tell you another story. My dad in the office used to take cough syrup, and he bought a gallon of it for $20, and I would put it in these little brown bottles, all right, with a funnel. You know, this is the old days, 60s, 70s, when I was in grade school. So I'd put them in there, and he'd charge $6 for each bottle of cough syrup. $6 was a lot of money in those days, all right, $6. So I went to my dad and I said, you know, Dad, you really rip it, because I did like 30 bottles from 1 gallon. Well, that's 30 times $180. He's only paying 20. This isn't Microsoft. Windows cost nothing. But anyway, so I said, Dad, you ought to charge $3 for the cough syrup, and you're still making a fortune and people aren't getting ripped off. So he said, all right, I'll do it. So he did it. What happened? People came back, said, you know, this stuff's good, but it's not as good as that $6 stuff you used to have. It's something in our brain. If you pay a lot for it, it must be good. All right. Take the pills regularly. Most expensive ones are the ones you don't take. Such concern. Talk a little bit about heart attacks, hyperlipidemia, cholesterol, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Clint Eastwood, all right? You've got good cholesterol. The high density are the good or the protective, the cholesterol that's being removed from the body. So you want a high number of that, all right? And the higher the level, in general, the better. Range of 20 to 60. Boy, if you can get it over 60, it's a negative risk factor. In other words, your risk of having something is even less. 30 to 100 in women. Exercise, meds, small quantities of red wine can do that. LDL, the lower the better. 60 to 220, 60 to 200. Limited exercise, low cholesterol diet. But it's hereditary, I hate to tell you. So if you got an LDL cholesterol, the average heart attack is in the 130s of LDL. If you've got a 140 LDL and you're not 50 pounds overweight, you're not going to get it down. I don't care what you eat. You may get it to 100, maybe, but you're never going to get it to 70. All right. Your liver is programmed to make too much cholesterol. Well, the only way to correct that, and whenever you get a shiny brochure in the mail that things are dissolved, it's baloney. It's garbage. You know, use this to start your fires, because there is nothing that does this. And I don't care what Dr. Phil or these other Dr. Oz or whatever, it doesn't work that way. The more risk factors you have, the more likely you are to have an event. All right. LDL, the goal is less than 100, but you'd really like to keep your LDL under 70 if you can. The studies on the cholesterol drugs, the statins, are unbelievable. Every doctor I know takes a statin. All right. My LDL was 135. On the statin, it's 65. I take one a day. I can eat anything I want. I mean, it lowers it no matter what you do. You ever notice that there are less heart attacks now? I mean, and people, remember you used to see somebody at their office on a Saturday, some boss goes in and they find them dead. And you don't see that as much anymore because of these pills. So talk to your doctor, and they make the biggest fuss about muscle aches and this. When you're 70, you got muscle aches whether you take anything or not. And when you get a muscle ache from a pill, it's not in one hip. If it's a side effect from the pill, it's your whole body. And there are probably less than 3 in 100 people who can't take the pill. I feel sorry for them. This is a pill you want to take. You know what the side effect of the pill is? You're going to live longer. All right. So think about it. These drugs are unbelievable. The studies are as clear as the nose on your face. Look at the 16% relative risk reduction at 2 years. You see that number under there, P equals 0.005. What that means is there are 5 chances in 1,000 that what you see is not what happened because of the drugs. Well, you know what? If I had those odds of winning or of losing at the casino, I'd be there now. I wouldn't be giving the lecture. All right. So that it's unbelievable how clear the studies are on this. All right. Yeah, you really want to protect that car. Healthy lifestyle behaviors, regular exercise, 30 to 45 minutes, most days, at least 3 times a week. I always told my patients, donut, even the name says do not. I mean, they couldn't have named it more appropriately. All right, limit no more than 2 drinks in men, 1 drink in women. We mentioned you can't have them all at once. Flu vaccine. Now, there's something interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about vaccines, and we're going to close up here. The government only covers vaccines that keep you out of the hospital. All right, think about it. Do they cover flu vaccine? They cover COVID vaccine. They do not cover shingles vaccine. They don't, you actually have to pay for it, but you should get it. That Shingrix vaccine is unbelievable. We all had chicken pox when we were young. That chicken pox varicella virus lives in your body your whole life. And when you get to be 85 years old, your defenses are down a little bit. And all of a sudden that nasty thing comes out in one dermatome and gives you a rash that is painful. I've admitted people to the hospital with shingles, and there's no treatment for it. All right, we have various things we give them. We've almost put people unconscious to get the pain to go away. This vaccine, if you have the 2 doses 6 months apart, you're 90% chance you'll never get a recurrence or shingles again, even if you've had it. All right. People have to understand how vaccines work. Varicella virus looks a certain way. It has a certain coat. It gets in your body. It causes disease. In the labs, they make a virus with a very similar coat or outer coating to the organ, to an organism, but one that doesn't cause disease. So when they give you the vaccine, your body sees it and develops all these antibodies to that coat because it recognizes it, as an abnormal protein that's entering your body. Well, the varicella virus looks almost, it's like a Buick and a Chevy. It looks almost the same. So when you get your shingles, your body already has turned on its immune system to fight it so it doesn't infect you. That's how they work, all right? And all this controversy over things, but the government is only interested in saving money. If they give 1 million flu vaccines, they save 100 people or 200 people from dying of influenza on a respirator in a hospital. And over time, that saves them a lot of money because the vaccines don't cost very much. But being in a hospital on a respirator, $5,000 or $10,000 a day, Medicare pays. Everyone over 65, Medicare, get the flu vaccine every year. And when you're over 65, get the high dose. It gives you 4 times more antibodies than the regular dose. Don't listen to CNN and Fox News and listen to them about all their chatter about all these things. The studies are clear, and the government, believe me, if they cover something, the proof is so strong you wouldn't believe it, because otherwise they would never cover it. All right. Children 6 to 23 months, people 2 to 64, if you're diabetic, if you have cancer, if you have medical conditions that are on other drugs, steroids, etc., you want to take them. Women who will be pregnant, all right, you always want to have a flu shot in them. Nursing home, chronic care, if you're caring for certain people, you get it. Healthcare workers, we're required now to get the flu vaccine unless you have a note. And now the COVID thing, the COVID, creates all these now healthcare. Medicare will not pay money to hospitals where all the workers haven't had the vaccine. Well, you saw the stir that made. There's anti-vaxxers out there, and my daughter's one of them. She has 6 kids. My 6 grandkids won't take vaccines, so I give them to them when she's not around. No. I don't do it, but you can always find, there are people who think that the Cuban shot Kennedy and that George Bush bombed those towers to go after, and all these people come up with these theories. You got to go by some data. You got to go by, what's being recommended. Medicare covers the vaccine. All people over 6 months of age now need it. Over 50 to get the second booster 4 months after the first. So if you have the Pfizer, you get the first dose, the second, you get the booster. 4 months later, you get the second booster for people over the age of 50. If you're immunocompromised, if you have medical conditions, you need another. So you're talking 5 shots. If you get the Johnson & Johnson, it's only 1 shot. It's not as many. And you can look it up. The tables are very complicated to try and read about who should be getting it. This is what I look at. As of last week, 1,020,000 people have died from COVID infection. 1,020,000. Now look at the death rate per 100,000 people. Unvaccinated, 1.7. Vaccinated, 0.22. Those who've had a booster, 0.1. I don't want to see anything else. You're 17 times less likely to die if you've had the shot and the boosters. You can talk to your blue in the face that it doesn't work 17 times. And you're 8 times more likely to die if you haven't had the vaccine. Look at the data. I'm not getting that vaccine. Well, heaven help you, because, those are the very people that are going to have trouble with morbidity and mortality. I showed you this slide before. Why do you think we don't have these diseases anymore? Diphtheria, pertussis, tuberculosis doesn't have a vaccine. Typhoid fever does. Vaccinations save lives. Polio. I was looking at a show on FDR the other day. Polio. We don't have polio anymore. You think people I'm not taking that vaccine. I want to be paralyzed the rest of my life. So, you have to go about it somewhat scientifically. Try not to politicize it that this or that party or this. The CDC has some of the smartest people in the world working at it, trying to cure disease. So when they come up with studies, you should do them. Colonoscopy, everyone needs a colonoscopy starting now at age 45. All right, used to be 50. We were losing a lot of people in their 30s and 40s because the insurance companies wouldn't pay for a screening exam. Now they moved it to 45. You either get a fecal occult blood test or a FIT test, we call it. That's pretty good. A flexible SIG, we don't do anymore. That goes in only 18 inches. Well, if you're going to go through the whole prep, you might as well have the whole exam. Believe me, the prep is the bad part, right? Cologuard is you mail in a stool to the company and they can test it for abnormal cells. But I don't want the job opening those packages. If you have a first degree relative, if your dad died of colon cancer, heaven's sakes, you got to start at age 40, or your mom, or even your grandpa or your brother. This is a hereditary condition. So use your brain. When people get illnesses, pay attention to it. 75% of those who die are not up to date with screening. So next time you hear of someone who gets colon cancer, ask them you can't ask them, but find out if they had a colonoscopy. You don't want to, it's like having someone with lung cancer saying, well, you shouldn't have smoked. Well, apparently, right? Fewer people survive when they're diagnosed in a later stage. It goes right into the abdomen. All right, the colon's floating around, and when it goes through the wall, it seeds the inside of your peritoneum. Well, you can't, it's very difficult to get rid of. 5-year survival, 90% if you catch it early, 14% if it's late. All right, I'm not getting that test. Both my in-laws didn't have the test. And they never got colon cancer, but you're rolling the dice. You know what I mean? 147 people, and it's not a good cancer to get. Your intestine goes to the liver, no appetite, you lose 75 pounds. You're in a nursing home on a feeding tube. It's not one you want to get. Breast cancer, every 2 years, 40 to 74. Shorter, it's either 1 to 2 or 2 years. There are 5 different recommendations on this. If you're 75 or older and have 10 years or less, they say you can discontinue screening. I don't go by that totally. You can still get breast cancer. I think every 5, you just that's not something else you wanna mess with, but they have to come up with guidelines. Age 30, if you're high risk, if you have the BRCA gene or your mother or your sister had breast cancer, you better start looking at it early. A little bit about falls. Falls, every week in the office, people fell and had injuries. So it's very important, and it's this another aside, but people who are nobody over 70, under 70 gets a newspaper delivered. Right? They read it online. I had 3 patients my last winter who hit their heads on the sidewalk going out to get the paper, but they're all over 60. Young people don't get a paper. Older people like to read the paper and put it in their lap. But if it's snowing or icy and it's in the driveway, I'd probably wait until later in the day when it melts, because you can kill yourself getting that paper. And there's nothing good in it. Hip fracture leads to death as quickly as breast cancer diagnosed the same day. So you ask women, would you rather be told you have breast cancer today or walk out of here, trip in the parking lot and break your hip? The same. So when you break your hip, you're immobilized. You need surgery. your blood starts to clot because your body thinks you just got hit by a saber-toothed tiger. So your clotting turns up, and next thing you know, you throw a clot after surgery. Your body gets weak. You're in the hospital. You go to rehab therapy. You get pneumonia, and you're gone. So hip fractures are not a good thing. Treatment for osteoporosis. The pills for osteoporosis are fantastic. You take the pills for 1 year as a young woman, your risk of hip fracture goes down 50%. I wish we had a pill like that for everything. You take that pill for 1 year, and some of them are a 1 month pill. You take 12 pills, your risk of having a hip fracture go down 50%. All right. And ladders. I usually change this every year I get older. I make the age go up 1 year. But ladders, I had terrible injuries with ladders. I mean, you cut a limb and the limb comes down and knocks the ladder out and you fall. You put it on the gutter, the base falls out of it. And you can watch YouTube videos on this. You put it up there and the ladder slides on the gutter. I had my patient undertaker, 3 people died at Christmas putting up Christmas lights or cleaning the gutter. 3 of them. All right, common fallacies. If I don't feel bad, I must not be sick. I'm not in pain. There's nothing wrong with me. Don't ever think that. Shots work stronger than pills. It's not true. Shots may get in your system quicker, but we have people used to come in with infections. Give me a shot, doc. I go, I got a pill that's just as strong, but a shot, it's got to hurt a little bit. Then I know I'm getting better. I had 12 ladies from my dad's practice who got B12 shots every month. Boy, they felt good with that shot. A little red shot, a little cc of it, and they shoot it into your hip or your arm. I can't live without that. Well, Medicare was paying for these. Well, Medicare finally came out and says, we're not paying for a B12 shot in anyone who has a B12 level that's normal. I told these ladies that 3 of them quit my practice. They had to have that shot. We have B12 pills. The problem with B12 is you don't absorb it often in a pill unless you get the kind under your tongue, which can be absorbed much like the shot. So it's just funny. Something about getting that shot, it hurts a little, but boy, somehow that feels good. All right. If I hear it, Dr. Phil, it must be true. All right. If I ignore the blood in my stool or lump in my breast, it'll go away. All right. My blood pressure, people do that. I start them on a pill for blood pressure and they come back 2 weeks later, a month later, my pressure's normal. I'm going off the pill. I'm like, the only reason it's normal is because you're taking the pill. So you're not thinking right. Wife insurance. All right. Benefits of marriage. Married men live 17 years longer. It seems longer, and sometimes, but 17 years by being married. Okay. And I looked this up for same-sex marriages. It's not that good. It's not 17 years. In fact, it may be about the same. Single man's risk of death is 32% higher. Why? Unmarried, divorced, widowed men do not eat as well as married men, right? Unmarried men less likely to go exercise, more likely to smoke and take part in risky behaviors. We can see why this happens, all right? Other reasons. Married men to more educated women have a lower death rate. So if you marry a woman smarter than you, you're going to live longer. Cancer cases found unmarried individuals more likely to have advanced cancer at the time. And I saw this in practice. Men are funny. They get a growth on their shoulder. It's about the size of a baseball. And they come in. I'm wondering what this is. If you had a wife she'd look at that and go to the doctor. What's wrong with you? You know, I mean, men, you got blood in your stool. You think your wife sees it in the toilet. She's going to go, oh, it's okay, leave it. You know, more married cancer patients, more likely to survive, less risk of depression, and a happier retirement. All right. When a partner dies, increases the likelihood of illness and disability in the surviving partner. Men are more vulnerable than women. Married men get regular medical care. I have to tell you in practice, about a third of the men who came in for a physical, I go, who made the appointment? My wife. Now, it could be because they're selfish, because if this guy croaks, they're in trouble. But women take care of the husband and make sure they get physical exams. I like this henpecked. You know, there's two gates into heaven, the henpecked and the non-henpecked. Every man was standing in front of the henpecked gate except Larry standing in front of non-henpecked. So they yell over, they go, Larry, what are you doing over there? He goes, I don't know. My wife told me to wait here for her. Married men have a higher standard of living. Married men have better cognitive function, smaller risk of Alzheimer's disease. Eat a balanced meal, low in fat, exercise 30 minutes 3 times a week, avoid risky smoking, alcohol, drugs, take our pills as prescribed, bring them to the doctor when you go. Get all your vaccines. If Medicare pays for it, just get the vaccine. Don't ask too many questions. Get or stay married. We may live long enough to do what this 89-year-old lady in Florida does. This is the enemy right here. Of course, I actually saw one of these in Michigan. Doesn't that look like a Michigan hearse? Four-wheeler? All right, that's the end of the formal lecture. We have a couple minutes. Yeah.
Why do some individuals have increased liver enzymes on statins?
I'll tell you, the question was, why do some individuals have elevated liver enzymes? I probably had 500 or more people on statins, and not 2 of them had elevated enzymes. In fact, when I went to the speaker meetings on the statins, people with elevated enzymes often came down on statins. So it's very unusual. And anytime you see elevated liver enzymes, what do you think of? Right? So you always got to limit the alcohol, because that is something, but I rarely saw elevated liver enzymes, and that was always a concern with them. I don't think I stopped 5 people in my whole life because of that in 40 years. Yeah. I didn't talk about it specifically. There are 3 different pills, and there's a shot now that is covered by Medicare for osteoporosis. Alendronate, I'm using generic terms, Residronel are pills that you can take. Your bones, think about this. Every day you have osteoclasts that eat up your bone, and you have osteoblasts that lay down bone. So it's like Michigan roads. It's always under construction, okay? So all the time, these clasts are eating your bone, and they're reforming by the blasts. These pills block the clasts, so they don't eat up your bone. They just lay down new bone. So that's why when you take it for 1 year, you've added enough and you have to take calcium. All right, because what do you think lays down new bone? Calcium. So get calcium in some form. If you have stomach trouble with calcium, get Citracal. It's calcium citrate, not calcium carbonate. All right, and take that. You take those pills, and it's very important. I always, in practice, I'd have a 50-year-old woman come in with her mother who's 85, and the mother, And the 50-year-old walking with her, thinking I'll never look like, you're going to look just like her. You're going to look just like her. She worked in the war. She worked in a factory. She worked 14 hours a day. She scrubbed floors and worked and exercised, and she's hobbling around and she's lost 4 or 5 inches of height. You're going to get it. If your mother's got it, you're going to get it. So you take these pills, you don't get it. Or you get a very mild form of it compared to what other people do. But we never think that we're going to have the same problems that older people have. And then you get older and you have the exact same problems unless you do something to correct it.
Are they linked to the bone density though when the doctor prescribes these?
Definitely.
I'm just curious.
They're linked. You have osteoporosis, you have osteopenia, and you have normal bone. So you want to be normal, but if your bones start showing osteopenia, which means your T-score is like 2 times below the average 35-year-old, you want to start thinking about taking something. And there's no point in taking it when the horse is out of the barn. You don't shut the barn door, right? I mean, you treat some things too late. You got to treat it while you still have the bone available. So, yeah.
You mentioned earlier in your talk about how our arteries harden up, stiffen up like the rubber.
Right.
And like, I'm 67, I feel as good as I ever did. And so I like to go out and split wood. And I ski exceedingly aggressively in the mountains. And so I want to know, well, sometimes I go out and do this stuff and I go, well, am I pushing too hard? Do I have to slow down? I see a lot of people my age slowing down. I don't want to. And do I have to, or what do I have to do to make sure I can keep doing this?
The one of the best tests to do is this Heart Scan America. You can get a scan at our hospital of your coronary arteries for $50 to $100. It's a CAT scan. It ties to your EKG. So the same point as your heart is in every time, it takes a picture and draws a picture. The hospitals do it as a come on because 1 out of every 5 people who have it done need a stent or a bypass and they get their money back. But the other ones are getting the test for almost nothing. So if you're concerned, a rapid or a coronary CT scan is an outpatient procedure. It takes about a half hour and it tells you exactly what your heart looks like, and it's cheap. One other thing, people come in, I can't afford Medicare. Get your Medicare physicals every year and insist on getting blood work. I hear some doctors don't order blood work. I mean, what the heck? You go to get your car checked, you don't get an oil change. I mean, you do a blood test to find out how your kidneys, your liver, your cholesterol, your thyroid, your prostate, how all these things are doing. Medicare covers it. And you get the test done. If you're under Medicare age and you want a free blood test, donate blood. If you donate blood, what do they check it for? AIDS, liver disease, kidney problems. And if they turn you down for donating blood, you ask for a copy of the blood test and they can't charge you. You give it to you for nothing. So I always tell patients who don't have good insurance, go to donate blood and you'll get a free blood test and they're only interested in really serious things when they're checking it. And they often do a cholesterol as well for you. Or donate plasma and they pay you to take your blood. Yeah.
I was wondering about the COVID vaccine.
Right.
You said you needed cure of Johnson, then the place, can you switch and now get a Johnson booster?
I'm not aware of all the latest guidelines because I retired a year ago, but I think you stick with the same thing that you had in the first place. It just makes it easier. If push comes to shove and it's not available, I think you can jump from one vaccine to the other, but try and stay with the one that you got your initial series through.
5 shots.
I had the first 2, I had the booster, I had the second booster. And if you're immunocompromised, you need another one 4 months after the second booster. Yeah,
Just a quick addendum to that question. So in my case, is it generally a general rule that as you get older, you need to slow down what you're used to doing? You should. or
if
not?
you're feeling well and you're not having any symptoms, people would come into me with heart disease and you know what they'd say? I used to mow the whole lawn and now I mow half of it and I'm tired. I got to do it over 2 days. That's a big warning. Why can't you do the whole lawn in one run? You may not get chest pain. You may get shortness of breath. You're just not feeling, and fatigue and low energy is one symptom of heart disease. But if you're feeling good chopping wood and you never have any symptoms but I say if you want the ace in the hole, just get the rapid CT. If that thing's clear, you're not having a heart attack.
If I, is it normal?
Yeah.
Want to stick with the microphone? If we could.
Okay, yeah. the
Okay.
microphone.
The only person I know who lived to be 100 was my wife's father, and he had a wonderful sense of humor. And that's one way he lived well to 100.
I hope that's true. I was voted best sense of humor in high school. I have to also say one thing. My claim to fame for Holland is I went to Calvin. I'm surprised so many people showed up to hear me. Yeah. That's a sin. But I did date Betsy DeVos in college. And then she dated some guy who made soap or something. But anyway, she could have gone to the top with me. Betsy, if you're watching, One time I went out with her. Yeah.
Is memory issues a natural part of aging? And if you're starting to have trouble, what do you do?
That is the best question that we can answer now. Lily's coming up with medication. It doesn't matter if you're a college professor. It doesn't matter if you never went to school. There is a cognitive decline over time. Obviously, some people, it's my brother-in-law at 60 couldn't do his job. By 63, he couldn't eat and he died. So there is a cognitive decline in everybody. And what you can do is stay active, stay married, keep doing things that you do. If you want to do Sudoku or crosswords or stimulate, but I don't know that there's great evidence that keeps your brain functioning. And you can read on websites all the things you might do. But hopefully we'll come up with a medicine for changes. Your whole body ages. I mean, your legs, your knees, your hips, your vision goes, you get a hearing aid, and we never think your brain is getting older too, right? So that's why we don't elect 90-year-old presidents. We won't go into that. Yeah.
You mentioned family history with breast cancer and mostly through the female side, but I've recently heard that it can also, there's studies showing that it can go through the male side if they've had prostate cancer. It increases the risk.
I have to admit, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that correlation. They're both hormonal cancers, prostate cancer. The treatment for it is no testosterone, blocking it. And breast cancer, the treatment is no estrogen by taking medicine to do that. Cancers run in some families. It's funny. They either have a cancer family history or a heart disease and stroke. Nobody in my family relative have died of cancer. All right. But and my parents lived into their 90s. So other families, it's different than that. So.
Phil, could you repeat the osteoporosis drug that you mentioned a second ago?
I mentioned alendronate is the one that's probably the first one to come out. It's made by Merck, Sharp and Dome. But it comes a 70 milligram dose. You take it once a week. Yeah.
My mother passed of a hemorrhagic stroke.
Mhm.
Is there anything I should be alert to for hemorrhagic stroke? I don't know what the
Right.
Her perimeters
Did
are
she
full.
go quickly?
relatively, it came on and within 6 months, maybe, time, she started with a headache and
Right. So strokes come either a clot going to the brain or forming in the brain, or sometimes you get a clot forming there. It cuts off the blood supply and the artery in the brain starts to bleed. Okay. So it depends. You can have I have many people I know 60 years old doing their housework, terrible, worst headache they ever had. They collapse and they're dead within an hour. So if you start bleeding in the brain, there's not a lot of good things up there. You hope that being contained, the blood has pressure against it so it stops. But if it's just an oozing thing, the brain can handle it better if it's venous rather than an arterial sudden bleed. So the same risk factors, though, if you have high pressure in your arteries and you develop an aneurysm or had one from birth, that artery pressure can over time burst that aneurysm and lead to death. How old was she? 77. So
I'm 76 now.
you start thinking about that did she have high blood pressure? Did she go to the doctor?
She had 14 kids. But,
Right.
I've been on blood pressure medicine since maybe my late 40s.
Right. So that's important. We didn't have good pills in those days. We had 3 or 4. We got 140 pills for blood pressure now. All right. And less side effects than the old days.
Phil, we'll take one last question back here, and then if anyone else has anything else, you can talk to Phil after we're done.
Phil, one thing to mention here too to the group, there is a hiking club within HASP. So that is available. If Gloria, I know, is involved, but with me there's a group in Saugatuck led by an 82-year-old, and it's never less than 90 minutes on Monday, and it's always over an hour on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So there are organizations here that can get you on the road if you need to.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you for your attention this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.